Well, hey, welcome to the X podcast, where apparently
welcome.
Don't know if you saw the video that my frenemy Lydia
Thank you, Lydia, for supporting me on
made and posted on social media about my apparent inclination to kick off the podcast. And then the way you always look at me to begin each one.
Well, it is odd because,
you're just staring at me grinning so sweetly.
It is odd because when you host and you start off and you look at a camera and you're talking and the other person has nowhere to look except at you. So
you said that's one of your favorite times of the day.
The X podcast, just staring at you until you make eye contact, and then it's weird.
You just look so
fun.
sweet and eager,
Yeah. Well, welcome.
Welcome. It's good to have you at the table today.
Yeah.
And
it's good to be had at the table.
It's good to be had.
What'd you do last night?
Yeah. I knew you were going to bring this up.
Oh, well,
listen,
you started to tell me what your cheat yesterday, and I was like, save it for the podcast.
I would ask you to send me some prayers and good vibes, but whenever these come out, we record them in advance. It's always like a week or two behind. But, yeah,
So we don't know quite the impact of last night.
We don't know quite the impact, yes. So just a few things. Life's good. I'm grateful. God's good. Sun is shining, hopefully.
Yeah.
Actually, it's been shining all week,
gorgeous.
which has been amazing.
Fall, beautiful weather.
But yeah, I feel some struggle bus vibes. Last night I went on a very relaxing walk around Schiller Park. That was great. And then I don't know. I don't know if it was just a comfort meal. I drove to Five Guys. I've been there in probably 5-10 years.
Okay.
I haven't.
For real?
No, I mean, I'm
God.
usually, if I'm going to indulge, I'm usually, for fast food burger, I'm more of a Shake Shack guy, or on the West Coast, In-N-Out. But Five Guys is pretty amazing, I got to say. So I just had a craving, so I drove to Five Guys.
What'd you get?
I got a double bacon cheeseburger.
What else did you put on it?
I got fries.
What else did you put on it? You know how
Just mayonnaise.
Oh, that's it?
Just
because Five Guys is where you have all these. You can put jalapenos. I like to put jalapenos on it.
Really?
When I do bacon.
Surprising
barbecue
for some reason.
sauce.
No, just put mayonnaise on it. Got a small side of fries.
Mayonnaise.
And then I ate it all.
And hey, first of all, let's just point out that Five Guys doesn't have a small side of fries.
They don't. It's small.
It's massive. They fill a bag.
Small. Then they just fill the bag.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
You said you ate it all.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had a double cheeseburger with fries, and then what happened, you said?
And then I got back in line.
Okay.
And I got a single bacon cheeseburger and another small fry.
No, you didn't.
I did.
Are you serious?
I did.
How did you eat that much?
I don't know.
And then
maybe and then I was while I'm doing this.
You said you went and got a large pizza.
I did not. That part's not true. And then last night I don't know if it's related, but I told you, if you're watching my eyes right, I woke up at 1 a.m. and never fell back asleep. I feel like you probably never have those.
Not that often, but usually I don't eat 4 meals in a night.
That's true.
So
it's self-inflicted punishment.
Depression eating.
It's depression. Well, one thing I'm really sad about, I don't know how people listening or watching this will feel about this, but my favorite nightly comedian talk show host is leaving. Trevor Noah is leaving The Daily Show, and I'm pretty depressed about that.
I don't ever watch night shows for some reason.
Yeah, but anyways, so then we got up early. We had something at the church this morning, pretty early, But you and I were talking right before this happened. Some fun things. I just feel like we go in cycles of who wants to talk about spicy stuff. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about spicy stuff. I know we're not going to, but I will say yesterday, so I feel like every day has just been jam packed with so much going on. Elon Musk back in the news.
Oh yeah.
At first, he was the hero a couple months ago for Ukraine. Getting Starlink set up, and then challenging Putin to a duel.
Look this up.
But now he supposedly is about to buy back in the deal with Twitter.
He's back in with Twitter.
But then on top and he unveiled new Tesla robot yesterday. What's
the robot do?
I don't know yet, but
is it like a personal robot?
I watched part of it. It walks weird. I gotta say, it walks really, really weird. But it is a robot. And then, with Ukraine and Russia, he did a poll on Twitter.
Okay.
and said, what do we think about this for negotiation? And pretty much through his proposal gave Russia everything they wanted. Russia responded with absolute open arms. Yes, this sounds great. Finally, negotiations back. Because President Zelensky officially, I don't know if you saw it, signed a decree of absolutely no negotiations with Putin. That actually
they're kind of winning right now, kind of in the
right. So that's probably part of it.
So it's like,
but it's a big deal. I mean, he officially said no negotiations as long as Putin is in power. That they will not even talk. So all like doors of communication with Putin, he officially wrote in a decree, is done and sealed.
Whoa.
That's a big deal.
Wow.
So, anyways, Russia loved Elon Musk's proposal, and President Zelensky did not. He responded pretty vehemently against it.
Interesting.
So that was really, really interesting.
This article says that Twitter users hate Elon Musk's Tesla robot.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. Maybe we're just not ready for the overall overlords, the AI overlords. I think they're worried about AI
Yeah.
taking over the world.
It's a big fear.
We've seen enough movies. We know how the end goes.
iRobot.
That's basically going to happen.
You think so?
We're going to create artificial intelligence that's going to gain consciousness. I don't know that. I'm just saying. That's that movie, but...
Is Elon Musk a robot? Is he an alien?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Him and Mark Zuckerberg.
But he's got a lot of money, and he's going to buy Twitter again. $44 billion.
He's really, 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 really rich. Did you see President
Well,
Trump
he
just got back on the Forbes 400 list?
Who did?
Former President Trump.
No.
He's back on
Forbes 500? Top, or which one?
the,
Top 100?
I can't
Forbes
remember.
100,
Of
500?
the wealthiest, yeah. He's back on it.
Really? Mm-hmm. Man, must be.
And he
business must be good.
He tweeted crediting Biden's economic policies is the reason why.
Can't be a tweet.
I'm just kidding. He didn't do that.
It can't be a tweet.
And he's not back on Twitter
He's
yet,
not on
is
Twitter.
he? Okay.
Elon Musk would probably change that.
Something that devastated you in the, can we call it the sports world,
here
is
we
there
go.
was a big cheating scandal in the
Yeah,
chess world.
devastated me. Yes.
I saw you had a box of Kleenexes. What was it? One of the champions was accused of cheating 100 times.
Well, it wasn't originally that.
But now they're saying
Hans
that.
Niemann was kind of accused by Magnus Carlsen of cheating over the board.
Okay, so let me get this right. Nemo said
Not Nemo.
that Optimus Prime was
Hans Niemann.
okay.
Hans Niemann.
Yeah.
He's a young grandmaster in chess.
Is that what they call
That's what
him?
they're called. GMs are called grandmaster.
I should remember this from Queen's Gambit.
Yeah, he's a young GM. I think he might only be 19 or 20 years old.
Wow.
And came up through the ranks really fast, and then was in the past when he was accused of it online said that he only cheated twice, once when he was 12 and once when he was 16 online, and that he had never done it before and he was just young and being dumb. Then he played in a match over the board with Magnus Carlsen. It was a tournament, and he beat Magnus Carlsen. And the next day, Magnus Carlsen, resigned from the tournament, left the tournament. He pulled out of the tournament. And everybody was like, why didn't he pull out of the tournament? And then he kind of gave some cryptic messages and basically said he thought Hans was cheating, but he didn't come out and say it officially. So then there was all this buzz.
How would you know?
There was all this buzz in the chess world for a couple weeks, and he dropped a couple things, and then he finally released a statement where he said that he thinks that Hans Niemann was cheating and has been cheating a lot more than that, and that he won't be in tournaments with him there. And so,
the riveting fury of the chess politics.
It created. Well, what's interesting is that the Wall Street Journal came out with, or no, it was either that or the Washington Post. One of the two came out with an article. It was just on the news headlines. Came out with an article just yesterday, and there was a 72-page. It was, who was it? I don't know. There was a huge report that Chess.com did on his online games, because they have all kinds of engines. They've got all kinds of ways of basically reviewing everybody's moves and seeing their accuracy ratings. And like on a bunch of people, once this came out, a bunch of people started to go find his games, because you can find them online, and then start to load them into the systems and review them.
Oh, it sounds so fun.
His accuracy rating
sounds so fun to go back
is
and
way higher than anybody.
Yeah.
Bobby Fischer.
Well, he's a grandmaster.
that doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of grandmasters, but we're talking some of the greats like Bobby Fischer and some of the, that they're like his was so off the charts. So then this report said that he had cheated probably about 100 different times last time in 2020.
You know what's weird is they said I was watching something that said in all of these kind of this is probably going to come across offensive quasi sports right now.
Yeah, I don't know if I consider chess a sport.
Yeah,
it's
but
more of a
and all
head
these
game.
and a lot of miscellaneous competitive activities. There has been an upsurge of cheating. So there was something else that happened this week, and then in a fishing competition. Did you see this?
Yes, there were some weights in a walleye.
They were putting
weights in a walleye.
Yeah, like lead weights inside the fish, and I mean they showed the video of when they uncovered it. I mean it was was fury.
Okay, so then today let's just talk about cheating. What do you think should happen to people who cheat? Should they be allowed to participate in sports again? It happens in baseball all the time. There's all kinds of cheating scandals that are going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there obviously has to be consequences. I think depending on the weight of the crime and what is it, I think they should be probably not permanently disqualified unless that happens again. But definitely, if you're in a chess tournament and you're cheating, I think you should at least.
Well, some of those tournaments that he was in, those were tournaments online for money.
Yeah.
So, but they're online. It's
Well,
different. It's easier to cheat online than it is over the board. Magnus Carlsen is kind of suggesting that he's cheating in person over the board. The only way you can do that is have a device.
Yeah. Where?
Some say you have a device in your shoe. You'd have to have some device on you that would basically, through either vibrations or other things, would give you the move that you're supposed to make.
Like somebody's watching? Like,
yeah, you can. There's a variety of different ways that is suggested that someone could cheat. Is anybody checking to see if they have earpieces in? Are there, but yeah, there was a guy that made a YouTube video. This was about a week or so ago. That he just, when he heard about it, he just real quick went with some small stuff that he had, and he built a device that was about this big. It was kind of round, maybe the size of a battery, maybe a little bit bigger than that. That you could load from Stockfish, which is this like online like computer generated database that basically knows all of the moves that you can make, and it will always be whatever, and you can load the whole database down onto this thing, and you can make it so that it vibrates, so basically to know what moves to make, it might vibrate a certain number over to the 3 to the right, 4 up, and it would be pretty fascinating. I mean, I think cheating over the board way harder.
you love chess. I walked in your
like
office
chess
the
a
other day,
lot.
and you had bought a really nice, fancy
Well, I
chess
bought one for the
set,
office
and then
here
you and
because
Pastor Zach were just playing
I
chess.
bought one for the office because he likes to play too, and we play online, and so.
Okay, let's leave
Anyways,
chess. I feel the clicks going off.
Okay.
Although I will say, I finally entered the pickleball world this past weekend, and that is a lot of fun.
I heard you cheated.
How would you do that?
I don't know, but Tucker said you cheated. He said you.
Tucker was not a happy
Tucker
camper.
said you cheated somehow. Going back to cheating.
Yeah.
Oh, we have to play pickleball.
Oh yeah.
One
We
of
need to
these
play
days. In tennis.
pickleball and tennis. Yeah, it'll be
And
fun
chess.
to humiliate
We've
you.
been talking about that for a while.
Yeah.
We should come and just play chess while we do
We
a
talked about that
podcast.
before, and I think Kevin said.
Do you know how to play?
Do I know how to play chess?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so why can't we come play chess while we do the podcast?
Send us an email. Let us know if you would enjoy
Yeah.
that. Which, by the way, shout out to Dan Gallagher. We got an email, and he created one of the most, I don't know, it was like this stenciled design, almost like some people do
Word map.
sermon notes. Yeah, like word map of what we talked about in our 100th anniversary episode.
100th anniversary?
100th
episode.
episode.
Yeah.
Anniversary episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he did say that we did not say what the best donut was. So what would you say?
Oh, I
I'd
don't
say
remember
Buckeye.
now.
It was the Buckeye.
Yeah, was that the one with the chocolate and peanut butter? Probably Buckeye.
The Buckeye.
I would agree.
So what's new in your life?
The chess cheating scandal. No.
Okay.
What do you mean? What's new in my life?
What's new?
I don't know.
Tell
It's only
the
been a
people
week.
something they want to
It's
hear.
only been a week.
What's something that people want to hear? What are you working on? What are you thinking about?
I'm about to start writing again.
Yeah?
Yeah.
About what?
I will let you know
Okay.
in the future. Not ready to drop that, but I am ready to start writing another book.
When can we expect it?
I have no idea. Let me see how long it takes to write it first.
2023?
I don't know. I mean, if for some reason things just flew together, then maybe, and it would probably be late 23 if that happened. But It could be 24.
Yeah.
I don't know. I got to see. I got to see. But I'm going to try a little different method this time for making time, and I'm planning to set aside some days to kind of work on it. And so we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
So, what about you? What's new? You're currently writing too, and you're further along in the process and almost done with another book. You're cranking out a book every 6 months now?
Oh.
Wow. That's
Almost done's a little bit. I mean, I have a lot of words,
Oh.
but we'll see. We'll see. The goal is 2023. So,
Okay.
yeah, we'll both talk about it as the time gets closer.
I have to figure out. I have two very, very strong concepts that I'm passionate about, both of them. And but I think I know where I'm going to go. But
Well, don't do what I did, because I don't know if you remember, but the concept I'm writing on now, I'd started on. But then I was like, nope, I'm going to write this other book, the Holy Spirit one, whatever. So I started writing for months on that, and then I just
Went
came
back
to a place
to it.
I was like, nope, it's this one.
yeah, so I'm pretty confident I know which one what I'm going to write now. But
What's
yeah,
about?
yeah, I don't know. We'll find
Okay.
out. I don't want to drop the information too soon. I need to build it first.
Okay.
So we're talking infancy stages. So, yep.
Okay.
But there's been a lot of things happening that have been pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Like
what?
south of us. Like
Talking about in Georgia.
Hurricane Ian.
Yeah, Hurricane Ian.
What were you talking about?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, Hurricane Ian. I thought,
Because you got friends and family there.
I got friends down there, had some family in the area, but definitely, I've been down in Florida for hurricanes before. Never something like this.
Yeah.
It's kind of shocking, the devastation that's happened in Florida.
Yeah, I think it's so, and of course, we want to say this, especially if you know someone affected or if you're affected, that our hearts go out to you. We, as a community, are sending money and help.
Yeah.
To the state.
Yeah. Right now, our church is not only giving directly to it, and we usually have supported organizations like Convoy of Hope. I believe we've worked with Samaritans First. We just had a team come back from Kentucky. What was that, about 3 weeks ago or so? They came back from Kentucky to help with the aftermath of the tornado that happened there, the devastating one there. So, and I know that our team member has already been working with Samaritan's Purse on an opportunity to go down possibly end of October or beginning of November, taking a team of people. And there's always a group of people that are just super passionate about
I love it.
getting their hands dirty and jumping in to help.
That's a lot of the kind of blood that runs through this place is that heart.
And so we made an opportunity. We're not only just giving already from the church, but we made an opportunity for people to give directly to the organization through us. And so I don't even know. I haven't even seen what's happened from that just to start from this weekend. But, when you see something that tragic, that devastating, you feel both like empathy. You try to imagine what it's like. You see people stranded now, living in gas stations or on gas stations with suitcase and a few things and their pets, and like their houses are gone, just devastated. And yet you also feel like, man, what can I do?
Yeah.
And you feel so far away and removed from it. But I knew, I feel like hurricanes come all the time. Hurricanes hit Florida all the time. This one just feels different.
Yeah, you do kind of, there is that danger of growing numb, especially to hearing in Florida, oh, there's a hurricane.
Yeah.
And really on a lot of those coasts that get them a lot. And so it's almost like, okay, there's another hurricane. But then you realize, I mean, this was the largest hurricane to land in Florida's history. To land
The largest as in size of the storm?
I don't know.
It's not the highest. I mean, they've had they've had Category 5 hurricanes. This was Category 4. But
Lydia, you can fact check me on that. But I heard something to the effect of this was the largest. That
it might have been largest in size of the actual storm. And it looked pretty massive.
But yeah, I mean,
10-foot storm surge.
And so you see it and you hear on the news, and of course I think we're all desensitized to catastrophes, but it's a really big deal, and millions without power, and death toll is climbing. But then you put faces and names with it. I had a lady stop me this Sunday morning at our church and asked me to pray. She said she was just so worried about her son. Her son lost his marriage, moved to Florida, got a house, had to leave, and his house is devastated, destroyed.
Yeah.
And she just talks about even just the mental like what he's
Yeah.
dealing with of all the loss that he's already experienced, and then to move there and his home be destroyed, and not knowing what he's going to do, and just just already dealing with anxiety and just mental health, and
Yeah.
I just think there's so much that people are wrestling with through these things than I think we even realize.
Yeah, for sure. I've got friends that were kind of in the original path, which was supposed to come up through Tampa and in that area. They live in St. Pete, and they had to evacuate, which was pretty fascinating. I don't know if I said this on the previous one, but I found like when they give an evacuation order, if you don't leave, they're not coming to help.
Yeah,
that's
they don't.
That's not during the storm, but afterwards, there are crews and people just going through the rubble, and I believe one of the last things I read said the death toll was up to 72.
Oh wow.
Could be higher.
Right.
Just thinking people were trapped. One lady I was reading, she's been there for a long time. She's like in her mid-50s, had been in Florida for maybe her whole life. I don't know, but she said she has ridden out numerous hurricanes.
Yeah.
And I think you can probably, you've ridden out one. Okay, there's another hurricane. We just need to, prepare by this. But she was like, after this one, she was like, I'll never ride out another hurricane again.
Yeah, because somebody was telling me, because I saw a story of, I think it's somebody I was talking to on Sunday, almost, they were heartbroken for what was happening, but you could tell inside they felt a little bit of a frustration of why would people still stay back there? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I said, I saw, one guy they said was on the very top story of a building. His mom was in her 90s. He didn't want to try to move her.
Yeah.
So they stayed in the top floor of a building, and water was rising. And she's like, well, yeah, but if his mom's elderly, wouldn't even more so they want to fly her out? So I don't know if part of it was some people, you don't know their economic situation,
They don't have
money
where
to
you don't have
travel.
money to go anywhere.
Or like you said, some people, we take for granted, some people consume way too much news. Some people don't watch it at all.
Yeah.
You think nobody could be that in the dark, but there could be some people they hear there's a hurricane, but look, it's the boy that cried wolf. There's always a hurricane. I think I'm not going to go through the trouble of leaving. If it comes, it comes. I'm just going to,
I think hurricanes, too, are also unpredictable. Mm-hmm. So, if you've lived down there, like I said, some of our friends that we go visit every year, they used to live here. They've been here for over 20 years. They've been through many hurricanes. They're unpredictable. Mm-hmm. Like, there could be saying it's going to be Category 4, and then by the time it reaches you, it's Category 2 or a tropical storm. They could say it's only going to be this. It could intensify. They could, they originally were calling for it to hit in Tampa, and then it ends up going south and hitting really Fort Myers. Mm-hmm. And so, again, it's an unpredictable, thing. Weather is trying to predict it. So I think, a lot of Floridians have either been through hurricanes before and it wasn't that bad, have been, or it's just so unpredictable that they're just like, well, we don't even know that it's really going to be here. I do think economically speaking, there's a lot of people. Yes, there are people that have money that have vacation homes down there, but there's a lot of people that don't.
But did you see that there's they talked about right now there's about to be an insurance collapse.
Oh man, I can't even imagine
what happens out of this.
I can't imagine what happens.
It's interesting too. Like, not to side rail us, but it's interesting when you think about geographic risk assessment of where to live.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yes, I would agree.
Like one of the things I didn't realize till I moved to Ohio, because no offense to everybody that moves to Ohio, or that lives in Ohio, but you have people. They're like, why would you move? Actually, it's funny. When I moved here, it was more people that lived here than people.
They said, "Why'd you move here?
Like, why would you move to Ohio?" and I'm like, "Well, I feel like
I was trying to get my friend who lives in San Diego to move to Ohio yesterday."
How did that go?
As I'm sitting there telling him, "You need to move back," I was giving him a good reason to move back. He's from here. He's been here his whole life. He's living in San Diego because his wife's family is all from Mexico. She's from Mexico, and so they live in San Diego where it's 77 degrees and sunny every day. And so I was trying to get him to move back, and my wife is in the background going, "No, don't do it. Why would you do it?" I'm like, "Shh, quiet." I'm trying to get him to come take a job here.
Yeah.
But
and I will say, so for me, part of it is, or I mean, the reason I moved was calling.
Yeah.
A sense of calling, a sense of purpose. And now that I'm here, like, I fall in love with the people,
Yeah.
our community, and really the city of Columbus. I fall in love with
cool.
the city of Columbus is amazing. And, you know,
And
so
it's insulated.
It's insulated
from natural disasters.
Because there is a lot of things like, I mean, there's a couple other, I know we're side railing. There's a couple other mitigating factors as well, or just factors that play in. Like my cousin that lives in Atlanta that's in the chef industry, the, you know, culinary industry. He's like, it really is one of the food and drink capitals of America. And then the other reason is it's very centralized. So you're a somewhat short drive from a lot of major cities, from from Chicago or Detroit or
talking
Pittsburgh.
about
Columbus
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
So it's very centralized. So there's a lot of those factors. But then, like you said,
2/3 of the population lives within 500 miles of Columbus.
yeah. So, yeah.
2/3 of the population of the U.S.
Yep. So that's crazy to think about.
It is. Well, and for distribution, which is why
Yes.
you have seen a
Facebook
lot of
and-
things moving here. Well, a lot of data centers from Google, Facebook, Amazon, they're building
Intel.
massive factories. Intel building their chip factory. I guarantee some of that goes into it.
30,000 jobs from that.
There, I mean,
30,000
that-
high-paying jobs from that.
Well, there's going to be impact. So Intel is putting that chip that's $20 billion they're investing. It's estimated to be as high as $100 billion, I think, by the time they get done. But I can guarantee
And
one
through
of
that, they're finally going to expand the Columbus Airport.
Well, yes, I believe they are. And one of the reasons why I think there is that boom is because people are realizing, as we've seen an increase in natural disasters happening here. So, you know, you take your pick. It's like, okay, the beautiful places on the coast.
Earthquakes in California.
Earthquakes. Well, there's not just earthquakes. There's a long list of things in California.
Wildfires.
Earthquakes, wildfires. I mean, you go on and on. Running out of water.
Yeah.
Let's not even talk about that.
Yeah.
The massive drought they're experiencing and how the water levels are dropping in all their lakes, and they're having serious water conservation issues out west completely.
Yep.
It's all, I mean, California could be in real trouble,
Yeah.
like real trouble in X amount of years, maybe not even that far away. You got Florida, you get hurricanes and storms like that. Even South Carolina, the same hurricane came and hit. Not as much.
Right. Yeah.
Not as much, right? And so
Yeah,
you know, it is interesting. Tornadoes, you would think, but they're not so much. Tornadoes
more
tend to
Kentucky.
they are
And
more
Nebraska
Kentucky.
and
They do hit,
like
you know,
Kansas.
They've had real bad tornadoes that have hit in Greene County in Dayton. His Xenia is on record as one of the worst tornado disasters in the U.S., I believe, that F5 that hit. But for whatever reason, when tornadoes come through, they skip over Columbus. I don't know what it is, but
Well, I'll tell you what it is.
there's something about
They want to avoid the gray.
I don't think that's
So
it. I think they come in the gray.
So there is. It's kind of a, you know, it is weird though. It's like it is insulated. So Central Ohio is very seasonal.
That has all 4 seasons.
Has all 4 seasons. Of course, the only extreme weather, I would argue. I mean, my first year here, we had more rain than Seattle.
Yeah.
And the
We
polar
can
vortex.
sometimes.
We had a polar vortex where it was colder
Yeah.
here one day than it was in Antarctica.
Yeah. That doesn't happen very often.
Doesn't happen
but
often.
it's-
But so in general, it's
It
a
can.
seasonal but mild place
Yeah.
that is insulated from most natural disasters.
Yeah. And so that has actually created this as becoming one of the fastest growing cities in the Midwest, maybe even in the U.S.
Yeah.
But then so I think that's the
You got the landlocked blues and the gray skies.
yeah.
But you're safe.
But you are safe. And then you can go to Florida and you're going to risk things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a price to pay. But you know, when I was thinking about, what the people in Florida are dealing with and having friends, I know other people. We know we're connected to, I know some pastors in Fort Myers in the area that, you know, they've talked about just the devastations going on there in churches. I don't know if there's anybody that probably doesn't somehow know someone.
Yeah.
Or, you know, most people probably know someone maybe in that area. What I keep thinking about,
I almost moved to Naples.
Oh yeah, I think I remember that. You did.
And it
before
got
you came
hit.
here. Yeah. I think, you know, one of the things that I think that we will see the aftermath of, not just the cleanup, which, man, when I look at the pictures of it, I'm like, I literally am thinking, I'm looking at pictures of these marinas that have boats piled everywhere, and like big boats, and, you know, all over the ground, all over the shore. They're piled on top of each other. I'm like, who does cleanup for this?
Oh, not to interrupt. Did you see now as people are starting to come back, one of the biggest issues is all the water has brought alligators and sea snakes into the neighborhoods and houses.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would love.
I don't know if they look at it that
Did you
way.
see? Oh, they might not. I love alligators. And there was at one part
Why?
water came in, and there was like on one street. Did you see the video of a shark that was flipping
Oh,
around? There
my
was a
God.
shark in one of the
Actually,
streets.
I heard that wasn't true.
It wasn't
I
true.
heard that wasn't legit.
It looked legit. I saw the video. It looked legit. Maybe it wasn't, but it looked like not a big one, but it looked like a small
isn't
shark.
that crazy to have to come back to your neighborhood and worry about gators and snakes in your house? I mean, they're doing all these news
That'd be-
reports,
that would be
and there's
freaky.
they're like, yep, as you can see, right over there, gator right over there, gator right over there.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Gators live there too. But I think one of the things that is coming to my mind just thinking about, the aftermath of it is that whenever there is tragedy of any type, whenever there is the loss of any type, there's dealing with the immediate, which is the immediate, there's the emergency of it. There is the dealing with the cleanup. There's dealing with, like you said, the insurance collapse. There's like, do you rebuild these homes? And I was reading one article about FEMA is saying, if you're going to rebuild, you need to rebuild them properly. You need to rebuild them at a new level to withstand these kind of storms. There's all that stuff's involved. And just the impact of losing your house or losing, like not being able to live in your house for however long and being displaced and having to figure all that.
Yeah.
But I think there's also an aftermath that happens when any of us deal with loss. And that's like one picture of it right now that's visible for us in our country. But I think one of the things that is often overlooked that sometimes really comes behind, it lags behind, is the internal trauma. There's an internal trauma that happens whenever we face loss.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we are experiencing in our country right now, and really globally, is the kind of, as COVID has kind of waned in its impact, let's just say, whether it's gone through everybody for the most part, and it's not as, I don't know. We've seen that. I mean, it's been declared COVID's over, whatever, the pandemic's over, which is great news. But I think the aftermath of it is, what is the trauma from everything that happened during those 2 years that we felt like we lost?
Yeah.
Whether it was kids that lost time in school, they are behind. Okay, that plays out through psychological trauma that could happen. Kids or people afraid of not being around others, not being around grandmother, grandpa, because you could kill them, and what does that do to the human psyche of, even just the whole, just what did the whole isolation and do to people? Mentally, what did it do to them? So I think that there is a level of trauma that sometimes we're not aware of that we can walk through and experience when we face any kind of loss.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And we've had a number of episodes where we've kind of talked ad nauseum about the effects of the last 2 years and processing it and what it's going to mean in the future. And I mean, you even mentioned students. What was there? There was something that came out. I don't know if we talked about it in here before. That a study of crucial years for students to read. I think it's between like
it was fourth grade somewhere in there.
Yeah,
second and fourth grade somewhere in there.
Yeah, between like I think it was like between 9 and 11. 9 and 11. No, it was like 8 to 10 or something like that. But anyways, I have to look it up later. But there's this age that they said if students don't not just learn how to read, but actually like get in the rhythm of reading, it will never for the rest of their lives be second nature. But in this window of time, if they learn how to read to where it clicks, for the rest of their life, they'll actually enjoy reading. Yeah, they'll enjoy reading. And you can learn to read after that age, but it will always feel like you're like a chore or like something you're making yourself do. And it won't be probably most likely a lifelong process of something that's actually in your life. And then, And then the other thing is, later than that, I think it's ages 11 to 13 is a crucial window socially.
Yeah.
And I think we saw even the first year after the pandemic, the anxiety fallout. I think for years to come, we're going to be seeing the psychological effects on this generation from being quarantined, from being isolated. We're obviously right now experiencing a lot of the economic fallout and effects, and so many things came out of the pandemic. But I even think, and I've talked about it on a personal level, it's that whole thought John Eldredge says, and a lot of sociologists and psychologists have said that what we're experiencing is a global collective trauma of what we went through.
Yeah.
That we, and leaders especially, and people that are, I think everybody's fighting to survive.
Yeah.
And in the fight to survive, you experience pain, you experience hardship, but the deceptive part, the dangerous part is it's once the adrenaline peters off.
Yeah.
Once the fight is over, that's actually when the PTSD comes. That's actually when the trauma comes. That's actually when the effects come. And there's a lot of sociologists, psychologists, pastors, cultural observers right now that are really concerned that we as a world are really experiencing trauma.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to name it. And part of me doesn't even like to, because I feel like there's some psychology words that have been kind of like hijacked or abused, or like even abuse. Even the word abuse, I think, has been abused at times.
Sure.
And even trauma, I feel like has been abused, the word and the term. But I don't think it's hyperbole to say that when you take a world and send them through the ream of the spirit of fear that everybody's experienced, the disruption, the deep disruption, all the uncertainty, all the polarization and lost relationships, all of the year or two of your life that you feel like you lost, people that you probably physically lost. I mean, you take all of that. I just think there's a lot of us that are probably feeling things still that we don't even know how to name.
Yeah. And I think it is important. One of the things that I've kind of learned from my own personal meeting with counselor, and was, the counselor that I meet with when I, ask me, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And would begin to describe, I don't know, I feel this. Yeah. One of the things that the counselor would say to me is, okay, I want you to name it. What that's because, and so what is that doing is helping me. The way I work too is just helping me process and think about what am I feeling. Yeah. Some people have to think about their feelings. I'm one of those. I'm a thinker. So I have to go, okay, I'm feeling this way. Now I need to think about it. Let me think, why do I feel this way? Some people just feel like you. They just feel every ounce of it and know immediately. Some of us do. So it's a difficult thing for me sometimes to name what it is, but there's a reason for that. There's a reason why counselors will use that is because if you can identify and name what you're feeling, what you're processing, what you're feeling, you can then kind of work through and process, and you can understand why I feel the way I feel, what's led me to feel like this, what does that mean for me, how do I handle those feelings, what is a healthy way to respond to those feelings versus an unhealthy way. And I think that we all, and so I wanted to just take this, okay, so the big picture is, go through a natural disaster, you obviously, there's been a lot of things we've just named there. If you think about what's happened in the last 2 years, in the United States, we've dealt with all kinds of what I would say could be traumatic situations, and the pandemic being one, all the implications of the political polarization and what it's done to relationships can be another one. I think when you think about not just here in the U.S., but you think about the war in Russia and Ukraine and the impact that has happened, and you think about all the refugees being displaced,
civil rights movement
of 2020. There's just all these different things that you kind of add up. Those are on a big scale. Storms, fires, all those things that it can happen like in the physical, natural world. But I think that we all deal with loss on different levels and at different time, and not to try to compare, because I always think that's pointless. Yeah. But whether it could be, there are people who have lost loved ones in COVID. There have been losing your family, losing your job, losing your career, losing a pregnancy. losing. I mean, you just go on and on. There's different things you can experience loss. My brother, I won't talk too much about it, but my brother had a pretty tragic accident this summer. And he had posted about it, but just in resulting him having to have most of one of his hand amputated, and when you deal with that kind of loss that causes you to have to stop and affects you emotionally, physically, spiritually, loss that can impact your future. I think that we all have to recognize there is a level of internal trauma that we experience. And the reason why I guess we would just say this even now is I don't know if you're listening or watching this. I don't know your story. I don't know, but here's what I know. I know we all deal with loss. Loss of expectation, loss of dreams, loss of a business, we all deal with things, things that we thought were loss of a marriage. Loss of relationship with a kid, with one of your kids, that maybe it's gotten real volatile, and it's loss of a loved one who is in prison. I mean, you can go on and on. I'm just thinking about just different people I know and their situations they're walking through, and every single one of those type of losses, there is an internal trauma that our soul experiences, and I think a lot of times all we're trying to do is manage the physical. Manage the loss in that moment. So I think about what happened in Florida and the way that plays out is the same thing on any scale. There's an emergency or an urgent, you have to deal with the bad news. You got to deal with the loss in immediate. And that happens. Then you've got to, once that you deal with it, then you've got to somehow go through the rubble of that situation. You got to go through what's broken.
We don't like doing that.
We don't. I don't. I'm the kind of person that avoids that.
Maybe that's why I wanted to avoid this.
Well, I'm the kind of person, and this is something I'm learning for myself at this stage of life, this late in life, because I'm the type that's like, okay, that's bad, move on to the next one. Oh, that's bad, move on to the next one. And what that becomes is the distraction. I'm actually getting better. I mean, my counselor is even saying, you're getting much better at detecting when you're not doing well.
I need to go to your counselor.
Well, I don't know if my counselor will tell you the same thing, but I'm growing it. No, I'm not saying you're not, but I'm getting better but it only happened by going through a process with a counselor, dealing with some loss, dealing with some, difficult stuff. And the reason why I guess I would have never used the term trauma with certain things of loss, but I've had some reactions to things. I've had some panic attacks. I've had some other emotions that my counselor says, hey, do you know that those are all classic trauma reactions? And I'm thinking in my mind, trauma means that someone physically died in my life, and that is a trauma. Trauma, I got attacked physically. Trauma, I got assaulted. Trauma, those are what I often think about when I think about, justification for trauma. But what my counselor helped me see is that just my emotional, physical, mental response to going through things of loss was so indicative of people even with other different losses when it comes to trauma. And so hearing that was like, I don't know, it is kind of starting. It's like, oh no, what you're experiencing is trauma. I'm like, what do you mean? You know what I mean? Because I never pause to consider that, and then I move on to the next thing.
Because it almost seems like, especially in our country, it almost seems like two opposing reactions to trauma and loss is stuff it, don't feel it, suck it up, move on, and go. Or on the other extreme, it is debilitating. I'm going to stay stuck in it. I'm going to be a victim. I'm going to wallow. I mean, I'll be transparent for me. My two extreme reactions. I know you joked that I'm a 4, but when it comes to this kind of stuff, when crisis hits, I am definitely a 3 in those situations. My fight or flight is all fight, and that was reinforced to me during COVID in 2020. Like, okay, what we got to do? Let's go fix it. like type A, driven. We're gonna make the most out of this, and I'm gonna become the best I could be.
Yeah.
And how do I need to put out fires, and how do I need to like, you know,
Right.
whatever. And then it was on the backside that I'm like, oh, you know, I kind of crashed late 2020, early 2021 in some ways. Where I was like, oh, I need to make sure that my soul is okay. And but I'm either high on fight, or it sounds so horrible to confess. It's a kind of a dark vice, dark sin in a way, but is self-pity. I can feel sorry for myself.
Go eat a couple double
Go
burgers
eat a couple
and
of
French fries.
Yeah, and so like it's such like a horrible.
Yeah.
But I can
is.
do one of those too.
Yeah.
I can do one. And fight, or I'm going to withdraw,
Yeah.
and I'm going
Pity
to
party.
isolate. I'm going to whatever. I can do either one of those easily. But you know, when I was walking around Schiller Park last night, I saw this Instagram story from Donald Miller, and he's been doing like these quick little stories, and he's very big into the psychotherapy. Psychology of like Viktor Frankl and the logotherapy and all that. And he just said, the question was, how do you get through grief? And he said, I'm just going to tell you one thing. Let yourself feel it. Don't minimize it. Don't stuff it. Don't medicate. Feel it.
How do you do that?
And then he said, and feel it as long and hard as you can.
Okay, how do you do that? Well, let's help people who are,
Yeah.
because I
But-
think people listening or watching this right now, I think while I can't identify with what people in Florida are going through,
Right.
or say even people in Ukraine are going through, what I wanted to be able to bring into perspective, and one of the things that made me think of this, just real quick, and then I want you to try to answer
Yeah.
that question. I was reading an article, and there was a lady who was deals with trauma and like works for an organization where apparently she does it all over the world.
Yeah.
And so she was, her name was Sherry Slater. I was reading this in an article. She was in Ukraine or around Ukraine
Yeah.
in the first week that refugees are coming over. And so she's helping deal with people process. In this article, she was saying that people in Florida are going to be dealing with the same type of trauma.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, they're totally different situations. One, you know, you're displaced and you can have an enemy. The other one's like hurricane. You know, you don't even have an enemy
Yeah.
that you're dealing with, but your life's been uprooted and changed.
Right.
And so it made me think when I was reading this, like just the impact of loss is felt unanimously.
Yes.
Across the board.
Yes.
It might be different, and it could, you know,
But
the
here's-
situation
yeah.
is. But I think there could be. I think everybody
is.
listening has got some type of loss in their life. Maybe it's recent. Maybe it's not. That maybe they've never really processed or taken time to work through.
Yeah.
So why don't you? Can you tell me,
So-
like, how do you feel it?
Well,
I need to know as a thinker.
Okay.
who,
Well, but we're very much alike.
Yeah.
I feel like my torture zone is I'm both thinker and feeler. So I will stay stuck in my head, but I do feel deeply. And I think
I think about feeling deeply.
I think segueing into the practical, let me say this though, because before you get to the practical, I think there has to be an understanding that we as a modern Western society don't give ourselves permission to process.
Right.
I was thinking about, you know, the idea of us thinking through this topic, and I thought about the book of Lamentations. We're in a faith world, in our context as followers of Jesus, and in Scripture is an entire book that I don't know if America, even American Christianity, knows what to do with.
Yeah.
It is an entire book called Lamentations. In Scripture, and this was normal to ancient Eastern culture and Eastern culture now, and to biblical culture, it was normal that they would have, and they had an entire book that's in Scripture dedicated to the spiritual human act of expressing sorrow. An entire book given to laments. We don't know what to do that. Yeah. We are really good at taking the sections of Scripture that deal with prayer or worship or celebration or fasting, but what do you do with a whole book that just gives you an example of how to lament,
You know what's crazy
how to
too?
grieve, and how to sorrow?
I was thinking about the
we
old-
just skip ahead to the encouraging verse.
I was thinking about, just as you said that, throughout the Old Testament too, in the history of Israel, that whenever they had a king that was loved and that died, that oftentimes they would mourn for 30 days.
Moses dies. He's handed the baton off to Joshua. the Bible says they have the promised land ahead of them.
Yeah.
But they took time in the plains of Moab to weep for 30 days.
Yeah. That was
It's-
common to mourn for 30 days over a loss.
And it is healthy.
How long do we
It's
mourn
healthy.
for?
Oh, yeah.
30 minutes?
We suppress it.
30
and-
minutes?
And it oozes out sideways, and then we carry the. And so I just think that's important
So
to
we
say.
become unhealthy.
I think that's important to say because I think, if it's. Let me say it this way. I think in a kind of spiritual, emotional, human way, we have a broken digestive system in the West that we don't know how to break down grief properly, and pain that isn't processed turns to poison.
That's good.
It turns to the toxins of despair, of bitterness, of addiction, of depression, of anxiety, of lingering low-grade fear, victimhood. And so I just think, I think, how do you
feel?
How do I give myself permission? I think part of it is giving yourself permission.
Okay.
It's not unmanly or unwomanlike to grieve. And I think one of the ways, I think several ways you grieve, and as Don Miller said, you feel it. Number one is you resist the temptation to avoid it or numb it.
Yep.
So,
Do you know what numbness is? So my counselor told me this. Because there are times when I would feel numb about certain things that have happened to me. You know, to say, this happened, so how do you feel? Whatever. And so my counselor said that numbness is the highest level of feeling. But if I'm getting this right, I might be getting it wrong. But the numbness is actually experiencing all of your emotions and feelings. So it's kind of I guess it almost sounds like it's like a hidden thing. Like you don't realize it when somebody's just numb. Nah, it doesn't bother me. I'm just numb. No, you actually are experiencing and feeling all. Like you're not just one, like, oh, I'm feeling grief, or, oh, I'm feeling anger, or, oh, I'm feeling this. No, you're actually experiencing all of them. And I think the longer that you go without processing your grief or your pain or your trauma, the longer you go without taking time to do it, I think you start collecting all of them.
yeah.
And what do? You become numb.
Right.
And so you think you're okay.
Yeah.
Until one day you about have a breakdown.
Right.
You will have a breakdown.
Right.
It'll lead to a nervous breakdown. It'll lead to,
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that I have grown in and gotten better and it only really became apparent for me was actually working with a counselor and going through it. Otherwise, I just keep going.
Yeah.
I am the kind of person to just wake up and keep going. Next day, next hill to climb, next goal to achieve, next, let's just keep moving. It'll get better.
Yeah.
And I learned that, no, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so now I think I am a smarter, wiser, and my soul is healthier in that regard. So now if I feel something, I begin to recognize it right away.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, one of the things that I do, and I think you can talk about what do you do to feel. I love this idea about, I want to say, giving yourself permission, because as corny as that kind of sounds, for someone like me, it's actually probably really important. It may not be, for a feeler, it might be, I feel everything. But for somebody who's not naturally like a strong feeler, or you know what I mean, spend more time in my head than I do, processing my feelings.
Right.
For me to get permission I feel guilty. As like an achiever, I feel guilty.
Yeah.
Like, because I'm like, I'll spend time comparing mine to someone that they have it a lot worse.
Right.
Why should
Yeah.
I? I feel
Yeah.
guilty.
You compare your pain.
I compare my pain, and so
Yep.
I'm like, no, and
Yep.
and I have things to do, and I've got, I can't have a pity party.
Sure.
And it's not about having a pity party. It's
Yeah.
about, I think and I think that's the wrong expression. The wrong expression is permission to feel means that I am just going to wear sweat clothes. I'm not going to leave the house for the
Right.
next 2 weeks.
Right.
That's not permission.
That's wallowing.
That is not the same.
Difference between weeping and wallowing.
Permission is just giving yourself, say, I have felt something. I have gone through this. I'm feeling this way.
Yeah.
I need to process it.
Yeah.
I need to. And for me, one of the ways that I do this, like when I'm feeling this, well, my counselor says name it. That was hard. I'm trying to go through it because I'm trying to identify, okay, why do I feel this way right now? And but for me, one of the things that I do to feel it is I will write about it, journal it, when I pray.
Yeah, that's good.
That's
Yeah.
for me what I have found. One of the things I did several years ago when I was really meeting with a counselor regularly and going through this. One of the things that I did was because it's just like it overwhelms your mind when you're in that place. Like every time you think about it.
Right.
So I would write down on a page. I would write down how I feel about these things.
Yeah.
And I remember even for a while at the top of my little journal on there, I was putting a little face to define how I felt. You go to the hospital and you're in pain, but you're not sure. Or with kids, and you can ask them scale 1 to 10, how bad is it? But you can't do it with kids, so they give them this little scale of smiley face to frowny face to crying face. You know what I'm talking about? So I did this at the top of each page, just as kind of a reflection of I feel a little better today. I'm really feeling not great today.
Yeah.
I'm really this. And for me, that was just kind of almost like that whole chart. It was like, and it was kind of funny, but it's just like trying to be a reminder of this is how I feel today. And so for me, one of the ways that I do it that has been so helpful is talking to somebody about it before I would never talk.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things I've gotten much better at is talking to people
Yeah.
about it versus just internalizing it. So any kind of loss, any kind of pain, any kind of trauma, you need to be talking to someone. It can be a counselor, and probably should be to some extent, especially depending on how deep it is, how traumatic it is. But there's other people I talk to too.
Yeah.
It's not just that. It's people that I trust and I confide in, and people that I tell how I'm doing and stuff. I told my wife how I was feeling. All this stuff, and so that alone I feel like has enabled me to like live in it, not be overcome by it, still go to work, still have things to do, and it doesn't then consume my mind.
Yeah, I think.
But I'm still walking through
right.
stuff and processing it, but it doesn't consume my mind all day long.
Yeah.
It's been huge.
I think you named it all. Again, I want to specify when I say make sure you don't numb it and that you give yourself permission to feel whatever you do to avoid it. It may be working more hours or it may be a bottle.
Yeah.
But whatever you would do to not feel it, don't give yourself permission to do that in this season.
Yeah.
And instead, let yourself feel it. And I think maybe two good guardrails is give yourself permission to feel and to grieve. Don't give yourself permission to neglect. So, again, a lot of it is knowing, and a lot of it is having voices of wisdom to speak into you to help you manage what are appropriate rhythms of grieving. Look, grieving is not a linear process, and no two people grieve the same. And I think part of being able to grieve healthily is to take the pressure off you to do it perfectly. There's this weird thing too when we go through pain that, like you said, you almost feel a guilt of I'm not doing it right. Or, I did that, but now today I woke up and I feel crushed. I should be by this by now. What's wrong with me? And I think you got to give yourself permission to be human. Permission to be human, permission to grieve, and permission to know that it's going to look different for you than other people. But in that, with the help of wise counselors, you've got to decide, look, if your spouse just died yesterday, you may be immobilized on the couch for a week.
Right.
So depending on the level of trauma, but in general, when we grieve, we still have to keep the activities in our lives that we may not feel like doing, but that are going to lead towards healing, lead towards health, making sure we're not isolating, but we're still staying in healthy community, making sure that we're eating good foods, that we're moving our body, making sure that we're like Five Guys.
Yeah. It's okay to have one bad meal or two.
Yeah, one bad meal or two, not probably 3 in one night. But then, what you said is processing. Whatever stays stuffed inside will turn toxic. You've got to process it, and you got to process it in the right places.
Yeah.
In fact, if you stuff it in, you're going to incidentally, unintentionally process by oozing passive-aggressively over those around you, and it's going to seep through you and stay inside you. So what does it look like to have faith-filled friends that you can trust and that have a healthy perspective? Process out loud with them, a counselor, because there's something about. I had a conversation with one of my best friends a few months ago, and same thing. Every psychologist said there's something powerful about naming it. I think that you can even find that principle through Scripture about calling out what it is. Louis Giglio did a whole thing on Psalm 23 about naming in prayer what it is, bringing that before him. I love where it says in Scripture, let your petitions. It's almost like anxieties want to be brought to the surface, and we just suppress them. There's something powerful about letting them rise to the surface out loud, journaling or talking to a friend or God. But when we name it, but I had a conversation with a friend a few months ago, and usually if there was one negative emotion I felt like over the last 10 to 15 years, if it would surface from time to time, it was the emotion of disappointment. This did not go how I thought it would. This did not turn out. I thought this. But I had a moment, just to be transparent, it was a few months ago, where I'm like, I don't feel like I really ever dealt with fear, but it was like, I was just kind of opening up with a friend in a low moment, and he's like, Russ, I think you got to be careful. And he's not hyper spiritual, wouldn't usually use this kind of language. He's like, you got to make sure you don't let a spirit of fear in. And to name it. But after that conversation of just being like, okay, don't judge me. Here's all that I'm thinking and processing, and I think what's been bubbling up inside of me, half the healing happened just in that conversation.
Yeah. That's
I mean, half the healing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of along the same lines in tandem with what James said. I mean, pray to God for forgiveness, but when you confess your sins to each other, healing comes. The moment you really open up and there's confessing, not just what you've done, but what's been done to you, or what you're walking through, what you're feeling. There's healing. There's just so much healing.
Yeah.
It's not the last step, but it is a huge first 20 steps.
I agree.
And then process with God. I heard somebody, depending on the trauma, a lot of times, all of us have some level of trauma that goes back in the past.
Yeah.
But I heard somebody say, it may sound kind of preachy, but I think it's true. They said, anytime you visit your past without Jesus, it's a lie. And so a difference between healthy processing and unhealthy processing is, are you processing in the presence of God with the perspective of God? So I'm not going to visit my past without a perspective of, God, where were you during this moment?
Right.
What are you speaking into this moment? Where is your redemptive power possible in this moment? What do you have to say about who I'm going back into the past to look at this lie that I believe because of this event, but I don't want to do that without also inviting your truth into the moment with who you say I am and with what you have to say about my future. And I just think, it's interesting. I mentioned I went to a C.S. Lewis event a few weeks ago. The nerd side of me is the Ohio State University, and there was a reading. And ended up seeing a few friends there, and we were talking about all of our favorite C.S. Lewis books. And this maybe is the wing 4 side of me. My favorite C.S. Lewis book is the most depressing book he ever wrote, and it's not that popular. It's called A Grief Observed.
I have not read that.
It's this little book that he was never going to originally make it into a book. It was what he journaled in the weeks and months following the passing of his wife. He got married later in life, and his wife Joy died of cancer. And he wrote, in fact, one of the first chapters, it says, "Are these nothing but the ramblings of a madman who cannot just accept his fate?" But he talks about grief, and he talks about how he said, "I never thought." There's so many lines that just forever haunt me and stick with me. He said, "I never thought grief would feel so much like fear." And he just talks about the feelings of grief and what it's like. And he gave an example I think is really important too. He said, sometimes, and I thought it was interesting. He said, sometimes when I'm in this level of grief, he said, I hate when people are around and I hate when they're not. I hate when they ask me how I'm doing, and I hate when they don't. It's that weird feeling of, and he gave lines that, oh my gosh, I could go on and on. This is a sidebar, but he said when his wife was dying, there's no point in me telling you this other than this is my favorite line maybe of any book ever. He said when his wife was dying, he said near the end, he said, when you pass and when I'm about to die, if it's allowed, will you come to me? And she was like this just strong, ferocious woman. And I love her response. She said, aloud, she said, heaven would have a job to hold me. And as for hell, I'd break it into bits. And I don't know why, but I love that. But he said, he gave this analogy about grief that I just thought was, and loss that I think maybe could be pertinent to this. He said, when people ask you, have you gotten over it? He said, what does that phrase even mean? He said, gotten over it. He said, I suppose with some things in life, you can get over it and move past it and you don't feel it. He said, but if a man were to lose a leg, what would getting over it mean? Maybe the initial shock and pain would eventually wear off. But for the rest of his life, when he's getting dressed, when he's taking a bath, he said he will forever be aware of what he's lost. And he said, as for me, he said, will I one day not feel as deeply as I feel now? He said, yes, maybe. He said, but I fear I shall never be a biped again. And it's this deep, depressing thing. And his point was, look, there's some loss in life that's so deep that
sticks with you.
There's going to be an awareness. There's going to be an awareness of something missing for the rest of your days. And to me, I say all that to say, I think that's why there's kind of this lost reality we don't talk about as much in circles of faith, and that's heaven. And I think when you come to some loss that's so deep, look, the hope is, and I believe with all my heart, in this life, God is a restorer. I love the promise in the book of Joel. God is even able to restore the years the locusts have eaten. God is able in this life to redeem our pain and use our pain. I've watched God. I mean, just look at the cross. But I've watched people I know that God has redeemed and used the most ugly pain. God has brought joy. God has brought healing. But even in that, the ultimate hope, depending on the amount of loss we have, is not just the redemption in this life, but it's the hope that we have that in eternity there's an ultimate healing. Look, if you're listening to this, you've probably had moments, tender, vulnerable moments where maybe a spouse or a parent or even a friend held you in your deepest moments of pain and even brushed across your face your tears. But at the end of the Bible, it actually describes that God himself will wipe away your tears. That God himself will actually wipe away every tear for those that belong to Jesus. And there will be no more pain and no more sickness and no more death and no more sorrow. That there is an ultimate healing and restoration of everything that's been lost. And I just think on this planet, especially the crazier life gets, I'm a hopeless eternal optimist. And I believe God can redeem anything on this side of heaven. But I also know, look, here's something. I'm not trying to get all psycho-spiritual, somatic, but here's what I really believe. I believe that as human beings, we're actually born with a loss deeper than anything we'll experience afterwards. That in the Garden of Eden, we're told that Adam and Eve were actually clothed in the glory of God. And this is where my Enneagram 4 feeler side comes in. This is where I believe that C.S. Lewis was onto something. Because I believe we were born with a remembering of something we've lost that we don't even know. He described it as, we call it nostalgia or love or whatever. All of us as human beings have these transcendent moments where we're aware. And he calls it the remembering in the soul, the echo of a country we've not yet visited, the tune of a song that we know from our past. It's the remembering of memories beyond us and before us. And I think the problem with fours is they feel it to an exponential degree.
I can tell. I can tell. Well, so let me just wrap up with one of the things I thought that when you said it I want to finish this thought. That C.S. Lewis, like the whole getting over it. I think, as you said, there's really not a getting over it, but I think maybe if we could see it, there is a getting through it, rather than staying in it. So it's like, I think the wrong response is that, like, you may never get over the kind of loss that you may experience, losing a loved one, losing something that you'll never get back, that you always, that's some stuff you may never get over, but I think the most important thing is to get through it.
And you can do that.
And you can do that. And I think you can do it even more with the help of God. I really think God can help you. He's done it in my life, and it's, and I still see that. And so, I think that this conversation is really meant to say whatever people are experiencing from the past couple years, or just even right now. The world that we work in, we deal with in a great way, but we have the opportunity, let me say it that way, to hear of people's great pain and loss. Just I heard about it this past weekend. You heard about it. There's, I heard similar stories. I could go on and tell just some of the stories that I heard this weekend of just the amount of loss that people have had. The one guy that I told you that came that, had lost had gotten back, was in a horrible accident, lost part of his leg, ended up losing his wife, losing his house, back to addiction. Just it's unimaginable loss. I can't even relate to the level of some of the pain that we hear as pastors. And that's the privilege that we get, is to walk with people in their pain, is to try to help them move forward in their pain. I think it's probably something that we share in common with counselors. We do it from a different perspective. We do it together. They do it, But I think it is important that we are trying to get through it. And even from the last 2 years, there's probably a lot of loss and things that we have that if we don't deal with it, like you said, the pain will turn to poison. And I know one of the things that my counselor would often say is, okay, what healthy things are you doing?
Yes.
And so I think process your pain, do it in a healthy way, do it with somebody, do it with a counselor, do it with some friends, write it out, walk through those feelings, name those feelings, give yourself permission. These are all things that we said today. Give yourself permission to feel, give yourself permission to process, and day by day, you get through it. Day by day. You just get up, you do it another day, and I think over time, as you process it, it does start to get better. Doesn't mean it never goes away. You don't always get over it, but you can get through it.
And if I could add one last practical thing. Don't minimize the pain. Don't ignore it. Let yourself feel it. Process it in healthy places. Process it with faithful friends and in the presence of God. And then, and this doesn't usually happen at the beginning of the process, but eventually part of redemption and part of the healing process is when you look and see the ways God wants to use your story and your pain. I mean, I can't help but think. I can't help but think about Brock Strong. In our context, they say there's nothing worse than the pain of losing a child. And Terry and Christy have leveraged that pain. All of Canal Winchester now feels the hope and the joy and the ripple effects of, and they would say, on this side of heaven, I'll never get over that. But I've gotten through that, and God is using that. And there are some things this side of heaven you may never have full. There's perspective always comes, Because that's the big thing. Especially if you're in the middle of that traumatic moment, you got to realize this is it sounds cliche to say, but this is a scene. This isn't the whole story. This is a scene in your story. But if you process it healthy, and if you let, God will always use your story for His glory, His good. I mentioned Lamentations. I've read this before, but just as an encouragement to anybody listening, this is Lamentations, the whole book.
Read the whole book. Okay.
You know where I'm going. Lamentations 3. I want to read Message paraphrase. It says this: I'll never forget the trouble, the utter lostness, the taste of ashes, the poison I've swallowed. I remember it all. Oh, how well I remember the feeling of hitting the bottom. But there's one other thing I remember. And remembering, I keep a grip on hope. God's loyal love couldn't have run out. His merciful love couldn't have dried up. They're created new every morning. How great is your faithfulness? I'm sticking with God.
That's cool. Great way to end.
Whatever you're walking through, there's hope.
Yes.
And there is light at the end of this tunnel.
And another book.
By Hope. Actually, you know what? I haven't done it. Shameless plug if you need some hope. I did write a book.
Hope for the Wilderness.
Hope for the Wilderness. You can get it on Amazon.
And
And then after that, if you need some scary faith, you just get some scary faith and order.
I think we're done.
All right. It's been a good conversation.
Yes.
So
a helpful conversation.
There's hope whatever you're going through. Don't be afraid to process it. And we're here to go through it as a community.
Amen.
Until next time, we'll see you next week.